I am the Emperor of Flames.
Really though?
Yeah, I mean, that's what everyone calls me.
Well, maybe they should change it to me.
And why would they do that?
Oh, I don't know, maybe Disintegration Blast!
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, now that we've had a bit over a week for it to settle in, I've reached Anomaly level 120 and seen everything new that there is to see, so let's talk about Title Update 2 for Sunbreak as a whole. It's sort of a retrospective. What's changed? How does it change? Was it good? How did it compare to the last update? And what does it make me expect for the future? Well, of course, to start off with, we have the absolute stars of the show, the new monsters. And, well, unlike the last update, which had 3 returning rare species, 2 with slightly updated fights, and 1 with a significantly updated fight, this new update has 3 new monster variations that have never been to the main series before. Flaming Espinas, who previously did exist in Frontier, though with a bit of a different fight, Violet Mizutsune, who is just totally new all over, and of course Risen Chameleos, the first entry in a new type of monster we expect to see more of in Sunbreak in the future. As far as my feelings go, I loved all of these monsters. Aesthetically, they all look incredible, they're fun change-ups to the base monster fights that are already in the game, and I enjoy the fights themselves quite thoroughly, with 2 out of 3 feeling almost like nothing like their base counterparts, which is how a good monster variation feels in my opinion. Flaming Espinas is threatening, but not overly so. Its super attack fireballs can one-shot you even with guts thanks to the poison tick that it applies, but it is fairly easy to dodge it due to the telegraph of the attack, and aside from that, the fight is just very fair. I do really appreciate how different this feels from base Espinas, maybe most notably because of the paralysis was removed, so you don't spend a quarter of the fight just vibrating on the floor.
It's a dance thing.
The fight is pretty fast-paced, and it really draws out the more enjoyable parts of the regular Espinas fight on top of adding a bunch of new stuff too. Then of course is Violet Mizutsune, who is 1 letter away from its true name, Violent Mizutsune, because this one is just absolutely out for blood. The fiery bubbles are okay on their own, but it gets a lot cooler once you realize that what's really happening is the soapy liquid that Mizutsune normally has essentially just been replaced by oil. As for how this liquid swap happens, I don't have an answer at all, but if we accept that it has happened, it makes the fight a lot more sensible. It's just reasonable and it makes sense, and that just makes it all cooler to me, at least in my head. The bubbles can home in on you now, which is strange to explain logically, but makes a pretty fun fight mechanically. At heart, the monster is still Mizutsune, so if you target the weak spots, you can still keep it on the ground quite a fair bit, but the moveset in general has changed a fairly large amount. There are way more and different uses of these bubble mechanics, and it also leaves the little patches on the floor that give you the element equivalent of defense down, and then explode a couple of seconds later. Then of course there is the super attack where it puts a bubble over its head and then eventually pulls it down to explode on top of itself, but you can also cause it to lose focus during this and hurt itself with the bubble instead, which is a really nice touch. All in all, this fight is really fun, it's different, and I quite enjoy it. Then finally for the new monsters, we have Risen Chameleos. If you consider the fact that this is the equivalent of the Apex monsters from base Rise, I think it was actually done exceptionally well. A lot of the physical attacks have been changed up a fair amount, the way that Chameleos does invisibility in general has changed, and it will now do a lot more just general attacking while totally unable to be seen. Its poison is now venom, making it even deadlier, and it has tons of new ways to apply it as well. Then of course, just visually, this thing is crazy looking. I love when it starts glowing all orange, but I think it looks great in general, especially when you consider that it represents a monster that has outlived and overcome the curio feasting on its very life force. And of course, this is the monster that brings up the most questions for the future, as in theory, based on how it has been presented to us, we could and quite possibly will get a Risen version of just about every Elder Dragon that currently is in Sunbreak, as the only requirements to become Risen, as it were, is to be infected by the curios and then survive. The effect that this had on Chameleos is pretty much the level of difference that we would get in a variant monster in any other game, a monster that has enhanced use of its general basic abilities and a bunch of new moves to accentuate that on top. So the general concept of getting this on the other Elder Dragons that we have around is quite interesting to me, exciting even. Of course, the big questions here are the giant serpent Elder Dragons. Could we ever see a Risen Ibushi or a Narwa? Only time will tell, but I'm sure if we do, they will be quite the memorable fights. As for the other monster-based additions, we also had the addition of 6-star Anomaly monsters being Gormagala, Espinas, Rajang, Basilgeuse, and Pyrarachnikadaki. They all hit like absolute trucks, even harder than the 5-star monsters. They have loads of health, and that's pretty much what you could expect aspect of Anomaly monsters. If you are one of the people that complained about Rise and Sunbreak being too easy as a game, this is the type of content that you are looking for almost undoubtedly. Sure, it isn't Fatalis from Iceborne level hard, but it will definitely give the majority of hunters a run for their money, at least the first few times that they fight them, if not just consistently due to their obscene numbers. Then let's talk about the rewards that we get from all of this. Back to the proper new monsters, their equipment is all pretty cool. The armor itself has 3 brand new skills, 1 per monster. The first one is pretty niche, but fun nonetheless. The second one is Embolden, which actually has a reasonable effect on raw builds, especially as the Violet Mizutsune's armor in general is just pretty good for any weapon with guarding effects. And then Risen Chameleos is just a status boosting armor set in general, which now also affects raw thanks to the Buildup boost skill that it has, and thus a new major player in the meta is just raw attack builds with a little bit of status on them to boost the raw attack even further.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
On top of that, we of course have the weapons themselves from these monsters, with Flaming Espinas weapons being the star of the show, having an exceptional amount of fire element on them, but also hidden poison status, which means that every weapon in the game now has access to a fire poison weapon, so dual blades isn't the only thing capable of mixing 2 modifiers on a singular weapon anymore. And then the Violet Mizutsune weapons are decent, but not really fantastic. Then of course we have the decorations, which is sort of a big deal for everyone. We got 12 new decorations, and each and every one of them is important and useful depending on your build. We finally have a decoration for the burst skill, which is really strong for a lot of weapons. We have a double handicraft decoration 4 slots. We got 3 4-slot jewels that make ranged weapon users extremely happy in general. We got a 1-slot jewel for Chameleos Blessing, which is sort of just insane for poison builds. And we of course got the 4-slot decoration for every single element to make element builds very happy. This is a major shift for builds in general, as this creates space in pre-existing builds while also allowing new builds to exist that simply couldn't before, and it just gives us a lot more 4-slot jewels that actually affect our attack rather than just being more utility focused. And then on top of this, we have a new interesting rampage decoration, which is quite a unique effect too. Not necessarily better overall than using an anti-species rampage decoration, but it is nice to see them actually adding to this category once again, and with pretty meaningful things too. The last real notable change then is the curio weapon crafting got a slight upgrade, now maxing out at 6 augment slots, which allows for quite a few combinations of augments that you just couldn't do before, and changes up what the best weapons are for each category just slightly. It's a good change overall, no real complaints here. So how do I feel about the update as a whole then? Incredible, honestly. I think this update was a smashing success. We got a ton of new stuff, all of it feels good to me really. I enjoyed all my time spent with it so far, and I'm not going to stop playing it yet either. Overall, I really only have one complaint, and that is looking towards the future. Please, for the love of Gogmazios, can we get monsters that aren't fire or poison in the next update? Put simply, in Title Update 1, we got the Metal Wraths, which are fire monsters, and Lucent Nargacuga, who is a poison monster that can go invisible. It was very cool, but that's what they are. In Title Update 2, we got Flaming Espinas, who is a fire and poison monster mixed together, Violet Mizutsune, who is fire, and Risen Chameleos, who is a poison monster that goes invisible. I'm not complaining about the fights that we got. Really, I think they're great, at least this time around. The 3 monsters that we got are all done in quite inventive and fun ways. For example, while Violet Mizutsune is a fire monster technically, it isn't really all that comparable to any other fire monster in the series. But the main thing that I'm talking about here is equipment. For 2 title updates straight now, we have gotten weapons with fire on them, or weapons with poison on them, and then had to go against monsters that aren't weak to fire or poison because those are the new monsters. It just feels sort of counterintuitive. Give us a big ice monster or a water monster or something next. Just something a little bit different to cleanse the palate. I do like what we've had so far quite a bit, but I think we are due for a little bit of a change up in that category really. As for my actual expectations then for the future, I'm still feeling really good about these updates in Sunbreak so far. This one I actually enjoyed more than the first one. I know that the entire anomaly system in general was added with the first one, but I'm more of a monster guy myself, and I preferred the new monsters added to the game in this one. So, you know, they just hit the mark a little bit better in my opinion. I think it would be wise to expect that we get loads of Risen Elder Dragons coming soon, especially as we are now at 6-star anomaly quests, so there aren't really many more monsters that they can even infect with curios without making them risen, at least based on the context that we currently have. But outside of that, who knows? We could get more old returning rare species or monsters in general, or we could even get a whole new monster at some point, but you know, I'm excited to face it nonetheless. They've been really on point with the monster additions, they've been really good about the actual equipment that we've been getting and the decorations actually being meaningful to our experience, moving on past the new monsters themselves. The new monsters that we got were good, the new anomaly quests are challenging, I just have very little to complain about in general at all without being entirely nitpicky, honestly. Title Update 2 was a grand success in my opinion. What about you? Do you agree with my thoughts? Is there anything that you didn't like the execution of this time around? What do you want to see from Title Update 3 and beyond in the future? Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.